Yes, sir.
Good morning, Lieutenant.
Good morning, ma'am.
Will you state your full name just for the court's record?
Yes, sir. David Franklin, Franklin.
And Lieutenant Franklin, where are you currently employed?
The Chattanooga Police Department.
What's your current role at the Chattanooga Police Department?
I'm the lieutenant of the Family Justice Center.
What is that?
Family Justice houses our Special Victims Unit and our Juvenile Missing Persons team, along with other roles in the city of Chattanooga. They have stuff for domestic violence and for abused children, and has our child advocacy center.
What position were you in at the Chattanooga Police Department before you became a lieutenant at the Family Justice Center?
The previous 13 years, 3 years I was in the Latent unit, and the last 10 years I was a supervisor of the unit.
Okay, let's go back through your employment history with the Chattanooga Police Department. When did you join the police department?
2005,
And in what capacity were you at that time?
a patrol officer,
How long were you a patrol officer at the police department?
approximately 4 years.
And then what was the next division at the police department that you moved into?
The Latent Fingerprint unit,
Does that go by any other names?
APHIS unit,
What does APHIS stand for?
Automated Fingerprint Identification System.
What are the job responsibilities of a, would your title have been investigator in the APHIS division or?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what are the job responsibilities of an investigator in the APHIS unit?
We receive friction ridge scan evidence from crime scenes. We manually prepare that evidence to known individuals. We notify the investigator of our findings. We write reports. At times we can process items of evidence from crime scenes, and then when necessary we testify in court.
Okay, and at some point did you move up into a supervisory role in the APHIS unit?
Yes, ma'am, 2012.
And what position did you move into?
The sergeant of the unit.
What makes the difference between an investigator that you would have become in 2009 versus moving up a couple of years later into the sergeant position?
I oversee all the operations of the APHIS unit.
How many individuals are employed in the APHIS unit?
Currently there is 3.
And are all of those sworn law enforcement officers?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So in 2022, what position were you in?
2002.
2022.
22, the sergeant of the unit.
Okay. How many people were underneath you at that time?
There were 2.
Okay. Let's go through your educational history and your training history. Do you have to be specially trained to be a latent print examiner at the Chattanooga Police Department?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you describe, first of all, do you have a bachelor's degree, sir?
Yes, ma'am, criminal justice.
Okay, thank you. And can you describe, going back in time to when you first were in the APHIS unit, what training was required to be in the APHIS unit and be a latent print examiner?
Okay. For 2 years, the latent fingerprint unit, you're basically in training. You're learning. So I trained under another certified latent print examiner. That examiner was certified by the International Association for Identification. I trained under him. During that time, I attended a school put on by the National Institute of Justice, the National Forensic Science and Technology Center. It is in Largo, Florida. It consisted of 12 different modules, 11 different modules of instruction. And in between that coursework, you do additional coursework and assignments and pass tests, of course. I completed that school, and during my time as latent print examiner, I completed over 300 hours to continue education in latent fingerprint examination.
That first training program in latent print examiner training program is how it's described on your resume. That was a long training, was it not?
Yes, ma'am.
What do you recall? What months?
It was a total of 10 weeks, but it was spread out over several months.
Okay. And in those 10 weeks, did you have to have training, a certain amount of hours of training in different types of subjects that deal with fingerprint examination?
Yes, ma'am. Each week was 40 hours.
Okay. And you testified that since then there's been over 300 hours of training. Does some of that training include IAI conferences?
Yes, ma'am.
You just mentioned it for the jury. What is IAI?
It's the largest professional organization in the world. It houses latent fingerprints, DNA, serology.
Do you recall how many times you've attended IAA training since 2010?
I would say pretty much since 2012, every year except the last 2 years, I've attended that conference.
Okay. Has your training been ongoing from 2010 when you went to the original Latent Print Examiner training program? Was your training ongoing through your time in the APHIS unit?
Yes, ma'am.
Was that required by the Chattanooga Police Department?
No, but it is required by the IEI. You have to have continued training hours to keep your certification. You have to recertify over 5 years.
Okay, so you can't just be certified and not worry about your training for 10, 15 years?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you just testified about certification. Who certifies you as a latent print examiner?
The IEI, International Association for Identification.
Do you have to be certified to work in this capacity at the Chattanooga Police Department?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Are the other 2 individuals that work in the APHIS unit also certified?
Currently, one other person is.
And who is that?
Sergeant Siders.
Salyers?
Yes, ma'am.
What are some things, what are some subject areas that your training has focused on over the years when it comes to fingerprint examination?
Processing items of evidence, determining sufficiency of latent impressions, tell the difference in distortion, of the pressures applied, biology of the skin, the history of latent fingerprint examination, the list goes on.
And after you were certified as a latent print examiner, were you recertified after those 5-year periods?
Yes, ma'am. I've recertified twice.
2016 and 2021?
I believe it was 2017 and 22, I believe those are the dates.
What types of cases at the Chattanooga Police Department does the APHIS unit work?
All crimes.
From burglary to a homicide?
Yes, ma'am.
And at whose request do you examine fingerprints?
It's when the officers or investigative unit submits cases to our office.
In your years in the APHIS unit, both as an investigator and as sergeant, how many fingerprints would you say that you reviewed?
Items of evidence I've looked at for impressions, probably over 10,000 comparisons. Actually comparing a latent print and a known print, well over 300,000.
300,000?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And is there any type of peer review process at the Chattanooga Police Department?
Yes, we follow a scientific process known as ACE-B, which requires verification.
So would that mean that after you examine prints, if you're able to make an identification, somebody else would have to verify that identification?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Is that a nationally known procedure?
It's a standard that we follow.
Does IAA require it?
No, SWIGFAST, which is Scientific Working Group for Friction Originalis Study of Technology, provides standards, and that's one of their standards.
Okay, so the IAI doesn't even require it, but the Chattanooga Police Department still does that?
That's right.
Okay. And is the methodology that you use in fingerprint examination, is that accepted nationwide?
That's correct.
Your Honor, at this point, I would tender this expert as an expert in APHIS and fingerprint examination.
Any objection?
No objection.
Let the witness be recognized as an expert in APHIS and latent print analysis and examination.
Okay. So let's talk to the jury about fingerprints, Lieutenant. Just in general, before we get to the case at hand, okay? Are fingerprints, similarly to DNA, unique to each person?
Yes, we have an additional thing where DNA, if you have identical twins, you can't tell the difference. Well, even identical twins have specific fingerprints just of that person.
Nobody in the world has the same fingerprints as another person.
No, ma'am. Your fingerprints are above the womb, about 12 weeks in utero. There's numerous stresses and strain, the rise and lowering of your volar pads in your fingers, biological history. They can never be a duplicate. That's why no one will ever have the same exact fingerprint.
Okay, and what about the different prints on each of our fingers? Are any of our fingers contain the same prints?
The basic, so the basic 3 types, you have arches that come in one side and arching on the other side. You have whorl patterns that are whorls, and you have what's called loops, which flow in one side and back the other. So we all have those 3, but your individual characteristics, what we call level 2, minutia, you may hear minutia originates, those are particular to only you.
Okay, let's talk in more detail about some of those words you just used. Minutia, what is that?
Minutia is ridge events. So, like I said, those characteristics, we look at fingerprints. So your ridges aren't just smooth, straight lines. They bifurcate, which means your ridge will go along and bifurcate into two separate ridges. You have a ridge that comes on and comes through like a ridge ending, and then there simply is a dot, which a ridge is basically a ridge event that's as wide as it is long, or a combination of those three.
Okay, and you just mentioned ridge ends and bifurcations. Are those well-known terms in the fingerprint examination field?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Are there, you mentioned loops, arches, and whorls. Are those the three most common identifying factors in fingerprint examination?
Yes, ma'am. Loops are predominantly the majority of your fingerprints. Whorls is the second, and then your last about 5% are arches.
And you sort of already answered this, but can our fingerprints change over time in terms of age or if your body changes?
No, back to when you're in the utero, the volar pads recess, your fingerprints are set. They don't change throughout your entire life unless they're altered by like disease or scarring. But once you scar the basal layer, which is the basic template of your skin, that scar will replicate the rest of your life, so it's even more unique.
Okay, thank you. And did you prepare some demonstrative PowerPoint slides for the jury to help us understand this? This is a complicated field.
Yes, ma'am, we did.
Okay. Behind you, I'm going to show the jury this slide, and I'm going to ask you, are there two separate types of methods to process fingerprint evidence?
Yes, ma'am.
Using this slide, can you talk to the jury about the two separate methods that are used nationwide?
Y'all may have sat down, so I know something.
Felix, if you could turn to the microphone.
Yeah.
And Lieutenant, if you would like to use this one.
Sure. So what you see on the screen here is processing techniques, items for evidence. So depending on what kind of surface you have and what is secreted from the skin determines what kind of process you use. Predominantly what we use is basic fingerprint powder. So you'll see this here on the left. I'm sure you've seen on TV shows, CSI, and all the cool shows, this basic fingerprint powder. And all that do is adhering to the sweat and the eccrine stuff that's spotted your skin on that surface. However, we also could do a superglue fuming, which really, on plastic surfaces and other stuff, is more suitable for this because it really fixates the print in, so you can use that. However, there's another process on there I forgot to put up there is if it's so these are all for non-porous surfaces. If you pour water on this table here, your fingerprint residue or the water on the surface would stay on top of that surface. Same thing with your fingerprint residue. If I touch this, the residue from my skin will stay on that surface. So we use these basic two to process. However, I touch my file folder here. That's a non-porous surface, right? If I pour water on this paper, it's going to be absorbed, and so we use a chemical process to process that.
Okay, and is one of these techniques considered more reliable than the other?
Not necessarily. They're both. It depends on the case and what the examiner, what kind of surface and what is secreted from the skin. But predominantly, your cyanoacrylate or superglue fuming is more stable.
And what was being used in 2022 at the Chattanooga Police Department?
Both of these processes.
Okay, and in the case of State of Tennessee versus Jason Chin, was one of these utilized?
Yes, we use the cyanoacrylate.
Okay, so that photo on the left of that machine that none of us have ever seen before, except for you most likely, do you have one of those in the Chattanooga?
Yeah, we actually, this exact model.
Okay, perfect. I think you can sit back down for another second, and then you might want to get up again. I want to move into defining some important fingerprint terms for the jury before we get into the evidence. You mentioned ACE-V. What is ACE-V?
ACE-V is an acronym for Analysis, Comparison, Evaluation, and Verification. It's the process we use to compare a known print to a latent print.
Okay, and does the A, C, E, and V stand for anything?
Yes, it stands for Analysis, Comparison, Evaluation, and Verification.
Okay, and is that a term that's used nationwide by examiners?
That's correct.
Is that the official process for examining with validity fingerprint?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And let's go to known impressions or 10-point cards. Your PowerPoint's on the screen behind you. What are known impressions or 10-print cards as they could be called?
Known impressions are an intentional recording of the friction-rich skin, and this can be done a couple of ways. But the predominant way we do that is black printer's ink. You just roll it on the finger, and you roll that nail to nail on a contrasting surface such as a template card to record that friction-rich skin. Your top 10 boxes are your rolled, and the bottom box is what we call the plane impression for the print out simultaneously. Or you could use basically what we call a live scan device. And a live scan device is basically a flatbed scanner that does the same thing. It just takes images instead of ink.
Do you know which one the jail uses?
The gel uses the hemp gel uses a live scan device.
Okay. And this basically is when fingerprints are purposefully taken
Correct.
from a subject.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, the next slide, latent prints. So this is the other kind of fingerprints, correct?
Correct.
And can you describe these for the jury?
So latent prints are accidental or unintentional reproduction of that same friction-rich skin from secretions in your skin or a contaminant. Your body secretes mostly sweat, but it also has anchorin, amino acids, some other chemicals. Or you could touch a potato chip bag or get a contaminant on your hand and touch a surface, and that will reproduce that friction-rich skin.
Thank you. Are some latent prints better than others?
Oh, yes.
And can you describe that for the jury?
So there's different qualities.
We're in front of the mic, makes you a little better.
Yes, sir. So every recording of a latent impression is not a true recording of your friction screen because it depends on what's deposited, you know, how long it's deposited. Or you like me, like in the middle of winter, you'll still sweat. I obviously leave better prints behind. And then so there's different qualities and quantity of details present based on several factors.
Okay, is part of your job determining the value of latent prints?
Yeah, so back to the HV, your analysis stage is the first stage. We'll look and analyze the print. Is there sufficient quantity of those level 2 details, those bifurcations, those ridge endings, those dots. Level 3 details, which is called edgeoscopy, which is the outer edges of those ridges aren't also, they're not smooth lines either. They actually have peaks and valleys, like a mountain range. So all that we're looking at in the analysis phase.
Okay, so would you say that there are latent prints often located that are not of the quality that can be used for comparison?
Yes.
Okay. Does that happen often?
Yes, it happened in this case.
Okay. What can affect, you've mentioned this a couple of times, but what can affect the value of a latent print?
You're talking about how clear it is. Basically, what it affected is basically not how fresh it is, but if there's any slippage or how hard deposition pressure was or sliding, what kind of surface. Obviously, this table is a better surface to develop prints on, whereas like your new items, your refrigerators, your stuff in your home, your cars are basically repellent to fingerprints. They're made because you don't want to see those fingerprints everywhere.
Okay. What about liquid?
Yeah, liquid's not very conducive to fingerprints.
Okay. When analyzing latent prints with known impressions, what do you begin looking for at the very initial part of your examination?
So that's when you move from the analysis phase. So once you leave the analysis phase, you determine there's sufficient quantity of details present. Then you determine that print's of value. If not, you say the print's no value, you stop. So then you go into the comparison stage. So take those level 2 details, those bifurcations, those ridge endings and dots, and then any scars or edgeoscopy. You compare that to a similar location in a known print. Then you'll compare all the latent images, all the ridges in the latent image to all the ridges in the known print.
Okay. Is there a computerized system that can assist in potential matches between latent prints and known impressions?
The APHIS machine can give you a list of candidates compared to correct.
Okay. Is there any technology on a computer that you use when you're analyzing latent prints compared to known impressions?
No, we don't. We typically use just 2 loops, which is 2 magnifying glasses, or we can use like Adobe Photoshop and put both images up there that way.
So sometimes you use Adobe Photoshop.
That's correct.
Was Adobe Photoshop used in this case?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there, when you're examining prints, do you prefer to have the original print to use for examination?
That's correct.
Can you explain that to the jury?
So every examiner looks at latent print and wants the original image to look at. I mean, there's, obviously, I'll be honest and transparent, there's errors out there. The Jeremy Mayfield case where they have to erroneously ID someone because they had a copy of a copy of a copy of an image.
The quality could decrease as copies go on.
Correct.
Okay. And so, I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So ACE V, we've gone through analysis, comparison, and then evaluation. It's probably fairly obvious, but what's the evaluation?
So the evaluation stage, the examiner can come to one of three conclusions. He can say he's made an identification, which is basically he or she is stating the latent and the known print came from the same source. Or he can say he's made an exclusion, which means the latent print and the known print did not come from the same source. And lastly, they can say they're inconclusive, which means they can't tell one way or the other whether it did or did not come from the same source.
In your job in the APHIS unit, did you often come up with each of those three conclusions?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then the last one in ACE-B verification, what is that?
So once you've completed your analysis, your comparison, your evaluation, you'll turn the case over to another independent certified examiner who do their own analysis, comparison, and evaluation.
And that was done in this case?
Yes, done in all our cases.
Okay, thank you. Now let's move on to this case, the reason why you're here. In 2022, you were the sergeant in the APHIS unit, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What were your responsibilities as a sergeant in that unit?
I was working for majority of our most violent cases. I had the most experience, and then I would also be tasked by the homicide unit to process items of evidence.
Was there, or is there still, a way that cases are distributed to fingerprint examiners in the APHIS unit at the police department?
Yes, ma'am.
What is that?
So they come in, we have red lock boxes, so we kind of keep bias out, so the officers or the investigators or crime scene investigators put those cases in a red lock box. We'll go every morning, open that red lock box, take them out, sign them, and they'll all sign cases based on what type of crime there is.
Okay. In this case, were you asked to analyze certain items to potentially locate latent prints?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you recall what those items were?
Yes, it was 3 black garbage bags and 2 sets of handcuffs. And I did have a chance to look at the suitcase for suitability for fingerprints.
Okay, were there also 2 vehicles that you retrieved
Yes, ma'am.
latent prints from?
And I believe a Toyota, and then, y'all may look at my notes real quick. And a Toyota and a Chevy.
Okay, and jumping ahead and then we'll come back. After an evaluation, do you issue a report?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and in this case, did you issue a report that specifically related to the Chevrolet, the Toyota, and the garbage bags?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Let's first talk about the Chevy. Do you recall what kind of Chevrolet?
No, ma'am.
Did you actually take the prints off?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Our crime scene unit processed the
Okay.
vehicles.
Were you able to locate any prints, or did the prints that you received from crime scene, were you able to observe any latent prints that you could use for analysis and comparison?
Yeah, they submitted 4 separate impressions, lifts off the vehicle, and one of those lifts had a latent that was of value to compare to a known individual.
Do you recall where on the Chevrolet that latent print with value was?
The front passenger door,
The front passenger door.
the exterior.
Okay. And was a comparison made for that print?
Yes, ma'am.
Was there a positive identification made?
Yes, ma'am.
And who was that person?
It was made by Mr. Jim Cooper.
Why did, so to make a comparison, you have to have known impressions and the latent prints, correct?
Correct.
Because if you don't have one, you have to compare 2 different things. Why did CPD have Jim Cooper's fingerprints?
So all our impressions are run through that APHIS database. It gives a list of candidates compared to. So you're fingerprinted for numerous reasons, for applying for a job, you might be a teacher, a lawyer. There's numerous reasons why you're fingerprinted and it's collected.
So that latent print went into the APHIS system and it came back as a positive match with Jim Cooper.
Correct.
Do you have any knowledge of Jim Cooper's involvement in this case?
No, ma'am. When we're in our latent print unit, we stay back and try not to figure out who was involved.
Okay. And then let's talk about the Toyota Camry. Were there observable satisfactory prints on the Toyota Camry?
Yeah, there was 3 latent impressions submitted, and of those 3, 1 was a value. Excuse me, 2 were a value.
Was there also a palm print from the Toyota Camry that was of value?
That's correct.
Okay, so 2 fingerprints and a palm print were of value?
So each of the left 2 lifts had multiple impressions of value.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're correct.
And on that Toyota, were you able to identify where the latent prints on the Toyota were observed?
Yes, ma'am. The front driver's side hood and the front driver's, the second lift from the front driver's side hood, exterior.
And who did those, were you able to come back with identification on those prints?
Yes, ma'am.
Who were those prints?
Investigator Crawford.
Okay. Is it common in criminal investigations to locate an investigator's fingerprints on an item of evidence?
Yes, officers' first job is right for preservation of life. So they're trying to save someone, or they're trying to get someone in custody. Maybe an officer safety issue. They don't have time right away to put gloves on, so it happens quite frequently.
Okay. And now I'd like to specifically focus on the garbage bags. I'm going to show you, Lieutenant, what's already been identified or placed into evidence is Exhibit 185. Do you recognize this photo?
Yes, ma'am.
What's depicted in the photo?
This is our crime scene processing bay with the bags hanging out to dry.
And in fact, is that you in that photo?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you told where the bags were collected from?
That's correct.
Where, to your knowledge, where were those bags collected from?
They had held Jasmine Pace's body.
Okay. And I want to clarify something. Investigator Schubert's testified already, and it became confusing to me. The order in which the bags were numbered or identified, the 3 garbage bags have already been entered into evidence as 182, 183, and 184. However, the labeling, first of all, do you know who did the labeling in this case?
I believe she did.
Okay. One of them says that it's number 1, front most exterior. So do you know which bag that would have been around Jasmine's body?
From the documentation I received, number 1 was the most exterior bag, number 2 was the middle, and the bag she labeled 3 was the closest to the body.
Okay. From the outside in 1, 2, 3.
Correct.
And so this one says number 2 middle, and then this one says number 3 back. It's slightly confusing. I'm assuming it's number 3, but do you know why I would say number 3 back?
No, ma'am, I don't.
Okay, it's just labeled confusing.
Yeah, I believe so. That was Investigator Booker who put those back in the bags. I'm not sure how she let them. When she passed the evidence on to me, I wrote down in my notes which bag she told me was in relation to the body, and that's when I did my investigation.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
And were you able to locate latent prints on any of these garbage bags?
Yes, 2 of the bags.
2 of the bags. Do you recall which bags?
Bag number 1, which was the furthest from the body, had 4, and then the bag that was closest, most interior bag, the interior of that bag had 1.
Okay. And were any of those latent prints of value, high enough quality to be examined for comparison purposes?
Only 1 set.
And what set were those?
That was lift A.
Where was lift A on the bags?
The exterior of the 3rd bag.
Okay. And can you describe, at this point, in any detail the quality of those latent prints that you just described as lift A on the third bag?
So the quality of these images, for the latents in that case, I would consider a medium low to medium high quality. It did have some slippage or distortion at the very end, but the core of the impression was really clear. So I would, based on me looking at the prints, I'd say medium low to medium high quality.
Lieutenant, I'm going to hand you 4 photos, ask you to look at them, tell me if you recognize them. Do you recognize those photos?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
What are those photos of?
These are photographs of the image of the latents that are of value.
From
Comparison.
From garbage bag number 3.
From garbage bag number 3, correct.
That you were able to compare to known impressions.
That's correct.
Your Honor, I'd ask that these be collected exhibit 213.
So moved. You said 4 pics.
Yes, Your Honor. Using exhibit 213 behind you, can you describe for the jury, and you're welcome to use the laser pointer if you like, can you describe for the jury what we're looking at in this photo with a DF number 1011A on it?
So DF1011 is my initials and my badge number, and this is image A, so we document sequentially, so if there's more images, we're going to B, C, D, and so forth. We've had scale tape in because when we take a photograph, you want a true one-to-one image of the latent. You're going to compare it. And then down here, you see the 2 fingerprint impressions that were laid down simultaneously, which means at the same time. This has been superglue fumed, so your ridges you're seeing up here on the screen, these white, that's the actual friction-rich skin. And the black is actually the furrow, which was in between the fingerprints.
Okay. I'm sorry, was there more you wanted to identify?
Well, you also see some voids, and we'll explain what those voids are. That's the substrate that it's on. The bag creates voids. And there's also pockets. It's like if you have anything plastic that's crumpled up, it'll create voids in the bag.
That's what the black marks are that have no white in them?
Correct.
Okay. Second page. Actually, let me go to the I'm sorry, this is the second and third page. Can you describe what we're seeing here?
So these are my markings. When I determine the prints are of value, we'll mark the upper portion of it, and we'll put our complaint number and which number we put on it. So these are marked with our complaint number, and they're images 6 and 7. And then also in this image, it has been reversed. So previously the slide, can you go back one slide?
Yes, sir.
These ridges are white. Well, most examiners, we want to see black ridges, which are your brain's used to seeing. So we're going to be Photoshop and just invert the colors. All we did was invert the white image to the black images. If you go to the next slide, the ridges are not black.
Okay. And what's the significance of the numbers that have -06 and -07 at the end? The -07 is a little harder to see. It's right under the ruler.
06.
06, 07, so we previously on the Chevy and Toyota had the images or latents of 101, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when I got the bag, this would be limited images, the latent images 06 and 07.
Were 06 and 07 what were used to make a positive identification?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm also going to show you, I'm going to go to a 4th slide here. This was the 4th photo in exhibit number 213. Can you, using this photo and this slide, can you explain any further about that photo?
It's the same image I showed you before without the markings. So it's just the ridges have been inverted from the cyanide acrylite to black. So the ridges are black. And this has my markings on it yet. I haven't marked it yet. This is what as we photographed that day, this is what the image looked like.
I understand. I'm gonna hand you what has already been admitted into evidence as exhibits 198 and 199. There's 2 documents with each of those exhibits. Can you look at those? Do you recognize those documents?
Yes, it's known impressions.
Okay, and I've got it on the screen here. This is exhibit 198. There's 2 pages. These are the 2 pages. Are you familiar with Investigator Martis?
Yes, ma'am.
Does he often, did he, when he was at the Chattanooga Police Department before he retired, take known impressions from individuals?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you recognize these as the known impression print cards that were taken from Jason Chin?
Yes, I was present that day.
You were present when Mr. Chin was fingerprinted?
Investigator Martin is correct.
Yes, okay. And you'd agree that these are the 4 cards collected from Mr. Chin on that day at the police department?
Yes, ma'am.
Were these print cards, were these known impressions what you used for comparison?
That's correct.
Okay. So explain that to the jury. When they now see the known impressions in the same set of slides as they see the latents. So explain that comparison process.
So then we would go back to our office. We would put the latent impression on the screen and the known impression. We take those cluster, those level 2, level 3 details I was telling you about, the bifurcations, ringing dots. I would look for that in first in the latent impression. Then I would look for that in a similar location in the known impression. So then you would compare all the ridge events, all those ridges you saw on the screen previously on that latent image, and compare it to all the ridges in the known impression.
How lengthy of a process is this?
It takes a long time to base on how quality and quantity the details are.
Okay. And based on your examination, you testified that there's only 3 options, that there's a positive identification, that you can exclude the known impression from being the same individual as the latent, or inconclusive, correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
Okay. And in this case, when we talked about -06 and -07 on one of the latent print photos, were you able to make a positive identification?
That's correct.
All right. I'm going to show you what's already been admitted as Exhibit 212, collective. Would you agree that this is a different print card than the prints collected by Investigator Martis?
Yes, this is the live scan recording of the scan.
From the Hamilton County Jail?
Yes.
Did you use, for your either investigative purposes or for your testimony today, did you use the Hamilton County Jail prints?
I did use it to create a chart.
Would that be a chart to help the jury understand identification?
That's correct, ma'am.
Okay. And is this something that you often do?
For every case.
Okay, thank you. Do you recognize those documents?
That's correct.
What are those?
This is the chart that I created for court purposes.
And did you create 2 charts?
That's correct.
Explain what those 2 charts are and why you created 2 of them.
So one chart has the latent impression 06 and 07 marked up with those minutiae, those ridge events. And the second chart has the prints bearing Jason Chin's prints with corresponding ridge events.
And again, why'd you do that with 2 separate prints?
So you can see for yourself how they matched up.
In 2 separate sets of prints?
And 2 separate sets of prints, yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd ask that these be admitted as, I believe, 214.
Yes, ma'am.
Staple then. Display for the jury. The second page of Exhibit 214. So, describe for the jury here what we're looking at.
So this is a live scan image of those 10 print cards you saw, the ones that the Hamilton County Sheriff also took. So this is the left ring and left middle finger from that temperament card on the screen of Jason Chin's.
Okay, and I apologize, that is just a demonstrative exhibit. This photo is the first page of exhibit 214. Well, it doesn't have our PowerPoint has gotten rid of your, 1 second, Judge. Might have to do this a little bit different because of how PowerPoint presentation is working, Lieutenant
Take your
Franklin.
time.
Yes, ma'am.
You use the document can.
I might have to, we'll see if this works here. Your Honor, I'll have to use the document cam. I apologize, Lieutenant Franklin. Some of it didn't show up in PowerPoint.
No problem.
Okay. Yep. All right, so here's that slide with the numbers that are going to be helpful for the jury. Can you describe for the jury in this 214 exhibit what we're seeing?
So once again, you have the two latent impressions. You have latent 06, latent 07. Then you have the corresponding ridge features that are marked. Those minutiae, once again, bifurcations, red endings, dots, with red arrows going to those associated numbers. So in this image here, you have 20 ridge events that are marked.
And are those 20 ridge events what you were able to look at and then match to a certain person's fingerprints?
That's correct.
And is that certain person Jason Chin?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is this a common practice, a common demonstrative exhibit in your examinations?
Yes, when I testify in court, I always prepare a chart for the jury.
Okay. In every case, are there 20 ridge points? Is that the right term?
It depends on the latent impression.
Can there be less than that?
Oh, yes.
Can there be less than 20 with a positive identification?
Yes, if the scientific working group for Research Analysis Study Technology has a sophisticacy chart that basically gives you a guideline if your quality or latent is better or less, how many ridge events you need to affect an identification.
How many ridge events do you need to affect a valid identification?
1983, the IEI, which is once again every body, determined there's no scientific proof for a set number of ridge events to affect an ID. Depends on each examiner's training, experience, and knowledge. With that said, certain labs or agencies will have a threshold. We do not have a threshold. There are agencies out there that may have a threshold of 10 or 12 and so forth.
What do you feel comfortable with?
It's each case is specific.
Okay, in this case, you feel comfortable with 20 ridge events.
I've never seen anybody have 20 ridge events in common that's not been the person we identified it to. There's no one's had 20 ridge events that match up.
Thank you. And then the other page to Exhibit 214. Tell the jury what we're seeing here.
So these are the known images of Jason Chin's left ring and left middle finger, and that's the corresponding ridge events that match the previous slide of the latent impression. So you have, once again, you have 20 ridge events. And that's not all 20 that match, but this is 20 that mark on the chart.
Understood. Let's go back to the report that you prepare that memorializes your findings. Is that a copy of your report?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you prepare a report such as that in all your cases?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, I'd ask that this be exhibit 215. We're going to show it to the jury lieutenant. Hopefully we can go back to PowerPoint. Your Honor, DVD. Okay. Is this part of your report?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I didn't want to get it too small, so I separated it into 2 slides. So this is slightly complicated because everybody else is not used to these type of reports. So let's go through this. When it says submissions, what are we talking about with submissions?
Anything that was submitted on the case for us to look at, either latent prints or known impressions from individuals.
Okay, and you had testified that the Chevrolet, the Toyota, and the garbage bags were presented to you in this case.
That's correct.
And then the other items, real briefly, because you mentioned the other items that you also examined for prints. Were you able to make any positive identification on any of those items?
No, neither item had any impressions or latents to compare or even look at.
Okay, thank you. And then the known impressions that you have, were you able to add that to your report after positive identification was made?
That's correct.
Okay. And on the photo of the latent prints on garbage bags, you would agree it says DF1011A, A through E here.
Yes, ma'am.
But those photos showed DF1011A, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So then we go down to analysis, and you can see KMBA. You've put Chevy above that. What does this represent here?
That's the lift that was a value that I could compare to another individual. That was an off lift of KMBA, which Kristen Booker at the time, that was her lift.
And can you explain what the 22-128018-1-01 is?
That's the complaint number from the top, and then that is latent 01.
So we're using that number to identify this particular latent print.
Correct.
Okay, and then the Toyota, we see here, as you described, front driver's side hood, exterior, presented 3 impressions. And we can see that says 02 to 04 after that complaint number.
Correct.
That's because there were 02, 03, 3 prints identified.
3 prints, that's correct.
Okay, and then MJ 74585, document is being recovered off the front driver's side hood. Again, now this is 05.
Correct.
A 4th, and this was also Investigator Crawford's.
Yes, it was.
02 to 05 were Investigator Crawford's.
02 to 05 were Investigator Crawford's.
Okay. Now we're going to go to the next page when you start at the top here. Now you get to garbage bags.
Correct.
And you can see the DF1011A, which is reflective of the bag and the identification on the garbage bag.
Correct.
Okay. Document is being recovered off garbage bags. Exterior presented 2 impressions. Those are the impressions you've testified to. Is that correct?
Correct, ma'am.
Okay. And then your conclusion section at the end here is where you make your identifications and you report them in your official APHIS section examination report.
That's correct.
So what you had previously testified to was the fingerprint on the passenger side door of the Toyota was Jim Cooper's.
Correct.
The fingerprints found, the only examinable fingerprints found on the Toyota were from Investigator Crawford.
That's correct.
And then the 2 prints of quality to examine from that garbage bag around the body of Jasmine Pace were made by who?
Were made by Jason Chen. The prints of value were made by Jason Chen.
The prints that were not of value that you received or that you were able to extract from the other bags, they
can be compared.
okay. I believe that's it with this witness, Your Honor.
Good morning, Lieutenant Fingerprint. How are you?
Good morning, ma'am. How you doing?
Good, thank you. Just a couple of things that I wanted to clarify. In this case, you have created a report.
Yes,
Thank you. You're all right, finding like the document came in. Show you what's 215 here. This report was issued, I'm going to assume January 3rd, 2023, correct?
It was written then.
Okay. And who did the verification of your report?
Sergeant Siders.
Okay. And does he have a separate report?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's not included within your report. His
No, ma'am.
would be individual, correct?
Correct.
Just to draw your attention, I'm going to show you also what was marked as Exhibit 214. You've indicated that the numbers here, actually before we move to 214, still on 215, you've indicated that there is a complaint number 22128018.
Correct.
Is that correct? And down here under the garbage bag, there's the same number, 22128018, and then it has the -6 and 7. What does that mean?
It means latent impression 06 and 07.
And so that would mean prints that were picked up from the bags.
Correct.
Okay. Now, drawing your attention to 214, and I'll start with page 1. There's a number up here that is listed as 22128019-0609. What does that mean?
So 06 was the latent impression 06. 09 is a clerical error. It should have been 07 on the screen.
Okay. Is the 19 also a clerical error?
Yes,
for
ma'am.
the case number?
Yes, ma'am. We did the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint had the correct information. This was outdated.
Okay. So it should be 22128018-0607.
07, correct, ma'am.
Okay. And so that would match the two examinations that you've performed in 215, which are
Correct.
signified as 6
Yes.
and 7.
Yes, ma'am.
Where were those latent prints obtained?
On the bag or
Yes, on the bag.
on the exterior the third bag, most exterior bag. On the exterior, not the interior, but the exterior of that bag.
So the prints were from the outside of the most exterior bag.
Correct, ma'am.
Now, you mentioned earlier that the testing that you did in 214 was used with prints from the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. Or did I misunderstand that?
That was used to complete the chart.
To complete the chart. And to clarify, do you use the Sheriff's Office prints for every case or make the chart for every case?
Make a chart for every case.
Okay. And so this was typical work that you do, or that you did do while you were in the APIS unit.
That's correct, ma'am.
Did you use the Chattanooga Police Department prints or the Sheriff's Office prints for your investigation?
We used, to make the actual ID, we used the prints, the major case prints that Investigator Martis submitted.
Okay. And you were present for those prints being obtained?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Now, the prints that were used from the Sheriff's Office, were you present for those prints being obtained?
No, ma'am.
While doing your testing on these prints, did you have any instances where there was difficulty for you matching or processing the prints?
No, I mean, when we look at latent prints, we take our time. I believe the day that I got them, I think it was 2 days later before I even started marking or looking like in detail at the print.
Now, is Investigator Sawyers the only person that reviewed your work?
Officially reviewed, yes.
Okay. Unofficially? Did you have other people review?
Yes.
Outside of CPD or within CPD?
2 other certified, we only have 2 certified latent examiners to CPD, so we have to, if we want a third person, we have to go outside CPD.
Did you use a third person in this case?
Yes.
And who was that?
Monica Datz, the Brown County Sheriff's Office.
Okay. And does she do an independent analysis as well, or do you send her your report and ask her to just confirm it?
No, she does her own independent analysis, comparison, evaluation.
So within CPD, Investigator Sawyers, would he also conduct a truly independent, do you use the same procedure where there's no bias in a red box?
So if you have a single latent fingerprint, which means just one, we would do a complete form blindness test. We wouldn't even allow you to see the notes or anything else. When we ID multiple prints, the secondary examiner gets all my case notes, gets everything, because his job is to prove me wrong.
Okay. And was Monica Datz, sorry.
That's okay.
Was she the only individual that also reviewed your work?
No, I sent it to a companion that works in Omaha, Nebraska.
What was the purpose of sending it to 2 other people outside of your agency?
So when you get a quality latent, they're really high quality, right? There's no concern. When they get a little less quality, and you've looked at it over time, to keep bias out, you want other opinions, no other sound scientific process. You want more than one person looking at it. Make sure you're not being biased.
Did you have concerns of potential bias in this particular case?
No, ma'am.
Did you have concerns of uncertainty
No, ma'am.
related to the prints?
No, I did a thorough analysis, comparison, evaluation. I came to one conclusion. All these prints were made by Jason Chin.
Okay. Now, you mentioned also the handcuff and the suitcase being submitted to you for potential prints. Did you formulate any kind of report based on those pieces of evidence?
No, Investor Booker asked me to look at the suitcase to see if it was suitable, and we agreed that it was not suitable for fingerprints based on the texture of it. The handcuffs I did, and I did create a report for the handcuffs.
Okay. Now, that's not any of the reports that have been presented today, correct?
Not that I'm aware of.
While you've been testified, we've not seen that report.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Has that report been provided to the state of Tennessee?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, Investigator Franklin, in Exhibit 213, behind you here, the signifiers here, David Franklin badge 1011,
Yes, ma'am.
and then the A stood for, this was
My
lift A.
first slip. So when each investigator processes item evidence based on that complaint number, you start with A. So any image, any lift you take, that would be your first one, and then you go sequentially. So Z and then double A and so forth.
And is there a report that shows what A is?
Yes, my official report.
So the official report is what can tie those two together.
Yes, ma'am.
And so this is the exterior of the bag that's listed under -06 and 07.
Correct.
Both of the prints come from this one.
Correct.
Did you have any usable prints from bag 2, bag 1,
What is your definition of usable prints?
that you were able to test?
Yeah, I did develop other prints, but they were not of value to compare to someone else.
Okay.
So you have to be the threshold of being of value. If there's not sufficient quality of details as ridge events, I can't compare to someone. So we stopped the process.
At any point were these bags reprocessed, or did the
They
fingerprints
were.
get worse?
So we use cyanide acrylite first. Actually, we do a sequential processing. So we look at the bag visually, use alternate light sources. Then we go to the next step, which was superglue fuming. We photographed the superglue, and then I did additional tests of basically applying a dye stain, which is a chemical that fluoresces under different wavelengths, and you use barrier filters and goggles to see those. We used that process, but it didn't make them any clearer.
And just to clarify, you at CPD, not you necessarily, but CSU rolls and ink, correct?
Yes.
When you're talking, you used the term earlier, live scan. Is that like a copier where somebody goes in and basically puts their hand down?
It's basically a flyback scanner. It's taking images of your friction-rich skin.
And if I may have one more. Lieutenant Franklin, that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Can you redirect?
No,
Does the jury have any questions for Lieutenant Franklin? Morning, Lieutenant.
Morning, sir.
The jury has a few questions for you. I'm going to ask them that you can face the jury when answering, please.
Yes, sir.
Can you explain the process of how latent prints are looked for? Is it done over a large area, i.e. the entire trash bag or the entire car hood, or a smaller targeted zone based upon a visual inspection with the naked eye?
So examiners would look for the entire area. So if you had a car, for example, we'll process the entire car, from front to back, the interior. They tend to key on areas where they think it's more of a touch. Obviously, the middle top roof of an SUV, more likely it's not going to be touched, but areas to the door, the front, the back, obviously in this case, we process from the hood of the vehicle. So the garbage bag is a smaller item. I process the entire bag. All three bags, interior and exterior. When you run Sanger acrylite or superglue fuming, any prints or any residue on that bag, it will attach to.
Do you recall if Investigator Crawford ever shared with you the occasion in which his prints were made on the Toyota?
No, he didn't. I ran those prints. We run all prints before we know any information. I had no idea those are Investigator Crawford's prints. So,
You may need to refer to your notes for this one if it's helpful. Can you please confirm the number of the bag fingerprints of value were found on? Is it bag number 1 or bag number 3?
yeah. Bag number one I had labeled the most exterior bag was on the exterior of that bag, not the interior. The exterior of that bag is the two prints that were identified as Jason Chin.
And just so the jury's clear on that, we'll make sure there's an outer bag, a middle bag, and an inner bag. There's an exterior and an interior
Correct.
each bag, correct?
Correct,
Can
Your
you
Honor.
just explain that?
So each bag, also you have it outside of the bag, and there's also the interior of the bag. So those prints are on the third bag, which is the furthest from her body, and it was the exterior of that bag, not the inside of that bag.
Were fingerprints found on the handcuffs?
No, we have a new process of the recovery system, so we use copper and gold to process things. I use the recovery system, and there was nothing of value. The handcuffs were very pitted and weren't very good, were suitable for fingerprints.
Or can you redirect based on the jury's question?
Yes, Your Honor. Lieutenant, you testified that there was an official APHIS report related to the other testing that the jury has not seen
Correct.
of the handcuffs.
Correct.
Are you certain that you gave that to the state of Tennessee?
Yes, ma'am. It was on the CDI submitted.
Do you have that with you today?
Yes, ma'am.
Will you pull it out?
Actually, it's not on the CD. The CD that I submitted to you was the only one. I've got the photos of the bags.
Okay, and so in that report, the handcuffs were tested, the suitcase?
Suitcase was not tested. We did a visual exam, but it was not tested.
What in the other report was tested?
Only the 2 handcuffs and the 3 garbage bags.
Well, the 3 garbage bags were in the report that we saw today.
Okay.
Is there another report that reflects the testing of the handcuffs?
Yes.
Only the handcuffs?
No, it has the handcuffs and so when you do a processing request, when you get process items of evidence, Crouch Union will do a document saying what they processed, how it was submitted, what process was used. So I did that report, I submitted that report, and then the second report is any prints that are of value we looked at, that would be the APHIS report. So the crime scene report and the APHIS report.
1 second, Your Honor. I want to be clear about something. So what I'm showing you is the APHIS report that verifies the fingerprints from the bags were Mr. Tim's, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Are you saying that there's another report like that?
No, ma'am. This is the official APHIS report. So there's two separate reports. The crime scene does a report, so when I process I have an evidence for crime scene, I am part of crime scene. So there I would do a processing request saying every technique I used, how I process it, what time it was processed, what sequential processing I do. So I'd write that report. Since there was no prints of value, there was nothing on the handcuffs, would not go in an APHIS report because there was no prints developed.
Do you now understand where the confusion lies
Yes, ma'am.
in that exchange?
Yes, ma'am.
There is no official APHIS report for anything else
Correct.
because there was no identification.
There was no prints developed on the handcuffs.
Nothing further, Judge.
No further questions, Robin.
Any questions from the juror based on that exchange? All right, thank you, defendant. You may sit down.
Thank you, Your Honor.